What mistakes have you made during the screenwriting process, and how have you corrected them?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest mistake for me is poorly taking criticism. Getting really, I think one of the hardest things to do is, especially when you're writing a story that's close to you, is fighting back against someone who's trying to give you a critique or getting angry about it or whatever. Like, it's really hard to step back professionally. I mean, professionals who do this get used to that, but early on especially, I really had a hard time with that. I think we all just assume that we're all geniuses when we start.
Yeah,
you know,
pretty much.
most of us aren't. That's a big one, and it still sometimes is hard. Sometimes it might take me a minute to like, okay. But I had a friend of mine tell me one time that if I ever am in a position where I have to explain to you what my story's about after you've read the script, then I failed. If you should get it from the script. If they're not getting it, then that's a problem. You need to fix it. I don't understand why she says this. If you have to explain it, then you need to rewrite the scene. Because you're not gonna, what are you gonna do? Sit there when the movie's going in the theater and go, so she's doing it. You know, no, that doesn't, you gotta fix it. Man, and things like, I would write things that are, say, a comedy, and people read it and think that it's super serious and like missing tone. That took me a long time, where I would have in my head this story idea, but it was just not translating. So, and that comes down to like crafting words, sentence choice, I had a screenplay actually called Fluke that was supposed to be kind of a thriller. And every time they'd read it, they'd think it was a comedy. And it was so frustrating to me. Like, why do you think this is a comedy? And then I realized one day, someone says, well, it's probably because it's called Fluke. That sounds like a comedy. Oh, really? I never would have realized that. So that has taken me a lifetime to figure out, is just exactly how to structure a sentence to get the tone that you want. And it would happen to me. This is where I am thankful for corporate commercial work, because what that is your 10,000 hours of training. You're working and working and working, and you're writing scripts for commercial corporate clients who aren't screenwriters, right? And they're having to interpret what you're saying. And I would do a project and they'd look at it and go, I had no idea this is what you were trying to say. Or I totally did not get that this was the tone. It is vital for people to get that while you're writing it. So yeah, I don't know if that would be qualified as a mistake. It was just a muscle that I had to keep working out until I figured out how to get it right. And the only way to do that is by writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. Other things that I've learned is like how consistency is key when writing. I know a lot of people who don't write consistently, who want to be writers, or are directors who want to get that screenplay done, and they'll say things like, I'm going to write it this weekend. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, I made a commitment years and years ago to make a step every day towards my goal, my career goal. Now, for me as a director, that doesn't always mean writing, but I've found that if I try to write every day, even if it's putting a period on the end of a sentence, you know, it's the end of a long day, I'm super tired, I just sit down, open that screenplay up, I'll just finish out that sentence and go to bed, the story's in my head. And while I'm working, it's in there, rolling around. Because I feel like there's nothing worse than sitting down with a screenplay that you haven't looked at in a week or two, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, that's where I was. I hate that. It's like dusting off the cobwebs, and you got to clean your house first before you can even start. That just slows down your whole writing process. So for me, doing it consistently, daily, because that speeds, and just, it's like it's like oiling the joints, you know, keeping things working. That took me a long time to figure out as well, for sure.
What about that lovely person that stands up at a Q&A and says, I noticed the scene was such and such. Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Is that good for you to hear that? Or?
It's funny. Those are funny things. So there's a couple of categories those fall into. If it's critiques, which those are often there. Like, oh, I didn't like this. Usually when I have a finished film, there is usually nothing you can say about it that I don't already know. Ah, man, this opening scene is just way too long. Yeah, I know. I realize that. Like, sometimes you don't know until it's done that you realize, oh boy, that scene didn't work. And then people call you out on it. So there's usually no surprise with that part. On a side note, it's always funny to me that for film, I feel in the arts is one of the unique things where people just seem compelled to tell you when they don't like it, and specifically what they didn't like. I don't know if that happens with music or with art, with painting, or like, yeah, I didn't like your song, didn't really speak to me. But they do that with film. Like, they just seem like, you didn't ask my opinion, but here it is. You suck. For some reason, that's a thing. I don't know why. But anyway.
Or the startup world. Like, yeah, I tried your app. Yeah, it bugged out.
It didn't really reach me. So it's funny with film. So, that develops a skin. But sometimes with Q&As, you try to plan to hit audiences in a certain way, either to get them to think or to get them to laugh. Hopefully that works, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes people will ask questions about, yeah, why did you make that a comedy? Like, I never meant for that line to be funny. So those are usually, those would actually be kind of fun, because sometimes when a thing can hit, like this, in the original Star Wars, the stormtroopers that are out there in the desert, well, a lot of times those guys, like, the glove broke in the middle of filming, so they just had to fix it somehow. And now it branched out a whole new group of stormtroopers because, oh, his uniform is slightly different. Well, they didn't plan that. It was an accident. And that's great when those things, that stuff happens in filmmaking all the time. And it's really a wonderful surprise when it does. Fan theories, I think is what they call those. If you can get your film to a point where if they're theorizing about certain things, that's awesome, because now they're thinking about it. Yeah, but usually Q&As are very simple kinds of questions. What'd you shoot on? That's usually the number one question.
What's your budget? Yeah.
What's your budget? What'd you shoot on? Those are usually, but yeah.
But then there's some ones that are like writing savants that'll stand up and just, I know you feel like wow, you've really, really studied this,
but
and
that's
you got an angle to it.
I
like that. Okay.
And sometimes it can be, they can go off on tangents, but I find it an honor. If someone has taken it upon themselves to take that much time to invest their lives in your story, wow, that's pretty cool. Like,
that's a great way to look
even
at it.
If they didn't like it, like, wow, they really thought a lot about this. That's really something else. Like, I think that's a big honor. Isn't that part of why we did it? Because I saw a film when I was a kid that influenced me so powerfully and carried with me my whole life. To do that to someone else, that's great. That's an honor. It's a privilege.